Faced by uncertainties, will the world come back? And with multilateralism and unilateralism locked in battle, can integration still happen? And can it happen between the three strongest economies in East Asia, China, South Korea, and Japan? And welcome to CGTN Dialogue, special program on Japan, South Korea, China, trilateral trade. I'm Zhou in Beijing. And I'm joined here in the studio by Mr. Cheng Hong. He is the founder and chairman of the Hina Group. Mr. Ge Jun, he's the CEO of TOJOY Holdings. Charles Liu is founder of How Capital. And in our Shanghai studio, we're joined by Professor Qian Jun and a panel of entrepreneurs in our Shanghai studio. Let me give the floor to Professor Qian.
Good afternoon, Mr. Zhou Yue. I'm very glad to be part of this very dynamic discussion. We have some very outstanding entrepreneurs here in the Shanghai studio. Later on, they will be offering their thoughts and joining the discussion in terms of how to promote business relations between firms and businesses in these three countries. We have three representatives here, and they will ask questions and share their thoughts. We also have about 80 people in the audience, so we expect a very lively discussion. Back to you.
Let's start our talks here in Beijing with our guests here. So, Mr. Chen, COVID-19 has disrupted the global value chain. For East Asian countries, China, South Korea, and Japan, they are closely linked on the supply chain. What is your assessment of the disruption?
I think the early days of the COVID, which was in March, I think clearly that China's pretty much kind of shutting down that time. And clearly the COVID-19 affected the supply chain of three countries. But if you notice that, I think the three countries have the best record in terms of containing the COVID-19. And all three countries have less than 100,000 people affected and have about a few hundred to a few thousand deaths. So today, actually, just kind of getting back to normal. I think we're very happy that the three countries, regardless of what's happening globally, and that's really getting back to the stage we like to be. I even was talking to, during a difficult time, one of the CEOs who was importing panels from Korea, and he said that very quickly they're getting back to the normal.
But all these success probably get their source from the efforts from the three countries who have been relatively successful in containing COVID. But still, they have been doing some soul searching. Should we depend on the outside? Should we rely more on ourselves? What is your thought, Mr. Ge?
Certainly, we should work together to combat this disaster or this problem, right? The good thing, as Mr. Liu mentioned, the countries are actually getting back quickly. Even in May, I saw that there is a fast land track, for people to travel, opened between Korea and China, and also in April, even, when you are talking about the supply chain. Japanese government announced a policy to relocate those supply chain companies back to Japan or to other Asian countries. 90% of the Japanese companies in China said, no, we are going to stay. So that means the supply chain is really resilient in terms of handling this problem. And during the pandemic, you see a lot of trade platforms being basically built, and digitalization happens between these three countries, and that really helped quite a bit in terms of dealing with the disaster or the problem.
So, Charles, if there is anything we should do about the global supply chain, what would it be?
Well, I think supporting the continued integration of the economies of the three countries is critical, because this is not a supply chain that can be replaced in Europe or we move back to the US. It's a supply chain that requires technology, diligent workers, skilled workers, and most important, logistics. You have to have the ports, you have to have the shipping, you have to have airport, you have to have rail. Now that's built over the course of decades, and that is not replaceable. Whatever political ramifications may derive from the geopolitics against the supply chain, one has to recognize it's not a supply chain that can be replaced anytime soon or by any country or group of countries.
But nobody knew that this was coming,
Right.
and the disruption could last longer than people think. Should people hedge their risks elsewhere and in other ways?
How do you hedge? I don't think it's possible to move the 380 component suppliers for iPhone, for example, which are all
For
in
example,
Asia.
I can build a redundant facility back home so that if anything happens, I can rely on what is produced here.
Well, if you pursuit of profit for corporations is still their main goal, very few will do that unless you get major government subsidies. And sometimes even with government subsidies, it's an overlayer of administration that you have to address. So as long as you want efficiency, enhanced profitability, you have to rely on an existing supply chain, which is the most efficient. And that's what exists in Asia today,
Yeah.
unrivaled.
Efficiency and also complementarity, because
Right.
Asian neighbors, they have allocated their value chain so efficiently for so many years. That hasn't changed, Mr. Chung.
Hasn't changed, but however, the pandemic indeed actually have a lot of companies thinking they may have to redistribute a part of their supply chain on a we call territorial space, because what you're seeing today, you see territorial disputes among countries. They may be shut down. You have the
Many uncertainties.
Exactly. So I think how do you design an efficient supply chain in terms of building the technology into the supply chain systems to automatically redistribute your needs and supply flow? I think that becomes very, very important. AI, digitization, big data, and analytical, everything else. I think that's how something's happening now.
Okay. Talking about technology, what Japan is has always been championing the call to advance their own technologies. And actually, Japan has maintained a leading position in robotics. With its top inventor and also exporter of robots. Among them, SoftBank's Pepper is probably one of the most widely known and used. And Pepper can actually talk with us. It can also read our mind. In many ways, robots could possibly open a new door to the future of humans. Now, join me to discover how that magic works. Hello, Pepper. It's nice to see you.
Hello, Mr. Zhu. I am Pepper from SoftBank Group in Japan. Nice to meet you. May I invite you to watch a football game with me?
Sure thing. I'm a fan of football. Let's go.
Excuse me, sir. May I remind you to wear your mask?
Oh, I kind of forget. Yes, we should wear a mask all the time. Let's go.
It's my pleasure.
Well, it's empty stadium, but as we just said, it's a crowded place, so we should wear masks.
Yes, have fun here.
So we have brought in some replacement, although they are the robots. They're waving at us for fun. Why don't we play some football now?
Why not?
All right, you will keep the goal, and I will kick the ball, and to see whether you can make it. See, I scored one. I win. What do I get in return?
Well, I can dance for you.
Great.
Guys, let's dance together.
Sure thing. Well, that's amazing dance. Thank you so much, Pepper. Let's get back to the studio. Well, Pepper, it's really some fun time playing with you, and it's pretty neat and nice, but I was told that you've also been very helpful in schools.
Yes, I am Pepper from SoftBank Group. Last year, SoftBank Group cooperated with Zhejiang Province. My friends and I were placed in 269 schools. Students were able to learn how to program games and develop applications by using the programming tools provided by SoftBank Group. So we played guessing games, rock, paper, scissors, and all sorts of other games together.
Well, it's really interesting and inspiring, and that proves that we are already enjoying the benefits of having you as our friends. Thank you so much, Pepper. And my question to the guests is this going to be the future for man and robots?
Interestingly, my PhD was in computer science and AI before. And last year, I was on the same panel with the chairman of the SoftBank, Maya-san, in Riyadh. So, I think we all share in the view that I think artificial intelligence has come to a stage where we have a computing power, we have the capacity, we have storage. It's starting to get into the lives of a lot of activities. Education is being one of them, but also you can go to the translations, you can go to the homes, play with the kids. You can teach them English. You can do a lot of other things. I think we are really seeing a trend that the technology advancement of the infrastructure, everything else, making sure that we see the future of the artificial intelligence and robotics.
The robots like Pepper will be seen in more sitting rooms and classrooms probably around the world. As we mentioned earlier, we have dozens of entrepreneurs sitting in our Shanghai studio. They will also toss questions to trade officials from 3 countries, China, South Korea, and Japan. We have Zhang Shaogang, Vice Chairman of China Council for the Promotion of International Trade, also Naoki Yoshino, Chairperson of the Meeting of Japanese Government Bond Investors, Japan's Ministry of Finance, and Yu Chung Pak, former Chief Economic Advisor to the President of South Korea, and they will stay online and answer questions from our Shanghai guests. So now let's give the time to Professor Qian Jun in Shanghai.
I'm very glad to be joined here by Mr. Miyazato Hiroki. He's the founder and chief representative of Sunrise Oriental Japan Advisory LLC. So he's been doing business in China for many, many years. I think he has a lot on his mind concerning the topic we're discussing today. So, Mr. Hiroki, you get your chance to ask questions.
Thank you. Many think the ongoing FTA negotiation among the 3 countries is long overdue. What's your expectations for the negotiation?
About CGK FTA negotiations. This is a trilateral economic arrangement among 3 countries. The negotiations started in November 2012 and has held 16 rounds meetings since then. As this negotiation is carried on almost simultaneously with RCEP negotiation, the 3 countries have come up to an understanding that the 3 countries' FTA negotiation should build upon RCEP and reach the outcome of RCEP Plus. In other words, this means to compare with RCEP, the CGK FTA should be higher in terms of level of liberalization and be broader in terms of coverage of sectors so as to reflect its own unique value. In this regard, there gives rise to a sequencing issue, namely, RCEP should conclude first, followed by CGK FTA. Since the RCEP negotiation will possibly come to the end this year, I'm quite convinced that the CGK will accelerate their pace of negotiation and hopefully pack up the agreement next year based on RCEP. When CGK FTA is established, the East Asia market will be further open, and the three countries' cooperation will be further guaranteed by a sound and comprehensive rule-based legal system.
What kind of mechanism should we build together to facilitate more smooth consultation, communication, and collaboration among three countries?
Right. First of all, the head of the three countries must meet as soon as possible. This is the mandate. This is very important. But somehow, Japan has been rather reluctant to meet with South Korean leader. For that reason, that the three countries have not been able to schedule the summit meeting which was supposed to be held sometime this year. But then we are hoping that China could intervene in this process and persuade Japan why it is necessary, important for three country leaders meet and resolve some of these the trade and other economic issues. This is one. The second, the South Korea and the China have had a continuing disagreement and conflict of interest concerning regional security, including North Korean issues. Nevertheless, despite continuing disagreement, the two countries have been able to sustain rather the harmonious trade relations. And for this, I thank Chinese policymakers for their contribution. In fact, we have the free trade relations with China, and this free trade relation has supported and has helped increasing welfare of the two countries. So on the basis of this experience, I would like to recommend China and Japan to follow or to consider two-track policies. One track deals with security issues, another track economic issues, so that economic issues should not be too much influenced by the political issues. It's not going to be easy to separate the political issues from economic issues. Nevertheless, the past experience suggests that three countries have seen the interest of sustaining very harmonious trade relations so that they will be able to work out some kind of modality in which they could maintain two-track policies, one for regional security, another one for regional economic integration and prosperity.
So, Professor Chen, are you satisfied? Setting aside the security concerns, push ahead with the economic cooperation agenda. Who's your next guest?
Absolutely. I think we all appreciate this type of candid communication. Here with me is Ms. So-young Jung, Manager of Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency. Ms. Jung, which of the trade officials would you like to talk to?
Okay, thank you for having me the chance to ask. Speaking of trade integration and cooperation, I think there is different mechanism in government policy. At one hand, there is one world, one belt policy, and now we're talking about China, Korea, Japan, FTA. I wonder how business community can benefit from this.
I think indeed this is a very good and relevant question, particularly for the business people and the business community. When we talk about the business cooperation in this region or in the world at large, I believe the business people should follow up the policy orientation of the government at various levels, at national level, regional level, and multilateral level. And I believe at the regional or bilateral level, the FTA should be one key arrangement or instrument for the business people to consider. Because FTA means freer market, more facilitate business cooperation, and a high-level protection of investment. So the people, the business people, should really understand what it means what that means in very thick FTA arrangement, you have to follow chapter by chapter, word by word, to explore the business opportunity behind it and beneath it. This is really very important. That is also one of the jobs that the CCPIT is doing. Every year, we organize a number of seminars or workshops just to explain the advantage of the FTA to our business community so that they can make best use of those arrangements. This is what I want to say about the FTA.
Well, Chen Jun, I think the Council for Promotion of Trade Chairman's words matter because for businesses, they should probably pre-study the FTA agreement, although it hasn't been signed yet, because to preempt on your industrial allocation resources allocation probably is important.
Yes, definitely. I think previewing what's coming is very important for everyone. So last but not least, we have Mr. Jeffrey Dai, Chairman and CEO of Shanghai Textile Management Consulting Company. So Mr. Dai, what are the questions you would like to address to Japanese and Korean officials?
Thank you very much, Dean Chen. And my first question is for our esteemed guest speaker from Japan. What do you think is the first priority in China, Japan, and the Korean trilateral economic cooperation?
Trade liberalization and trade connectivities are very important, not only in Northeast Asia, but also many other parts of Asian regions. Because Asia is expected to grow, and Asia used to be very high trade and GDP growth 16th century. But after the development of Western nations, the share of GDP in Asia has gradually declined. But we are expecting the economic growth in Asian region will become very large, and especially China, Japan, Korea, North Asian connections are very important in the growth of Asian region. So trade connectivity and free trade liberalization will be one of the most important factors. We should do it. Because free trade among three nations can expand to Southeast Asia and South Asia and Central Asia. Asia has lots of potential in the growth. In order to have high growth, it is very important to have freer trade among many nations.
Thank you very much. My second question is for our esteemed guest speaker from Korea. How confident are you about the prospect of economic integration for China, Japan, and South Korea? And what do you think about China's role in it?
The three countries have had a difficult period of improving trade relations, trilateral trade relations among the countries. That was before the breakout of the coronavirus epidemic. And at the same time, the coronavirus epidemic itself has damaged, to some extent, the important trade relations based upon the value chain in which China plays a critical role. And now the coronavirus epidemic is receding. The three country leaders are ready to meet and play important role in each sphere to improve trade relations. And they see the importance of improving trade relations among the countries. So I'm very confident that three countries will find interest in improving and working together to increase trade relations, improving trade relations. And in this respect, China, largest countries in East Asia, must play an important and a critical role.
So it's great that we have this dialogue and discussion. So I study financial markets, and in financial markets we deal with uncertainties all the time. I have to say we live in a very uncertain world. When you live in an uncertain world as we are now today, it's very important to focus what's certain out there. What's certain out there is that China, Japan, and South Korea, among other Asian nations, have basically put the COVID-19 virus under control, and the economies are recovering. If you look beyond Asia, there's a lot of uncertainties in US and Europe. So really, if you look around the world, the only certain thing about economic recovery is located in Asia. And as we have discussed throughout today, cooperation, more trading activities among the three nations and also with other Asian economies is not only important for these countries, but it's increasingly very important and crucial for the global economy. That is, the growth in China, the growth in South Korea and in Japan, separately and together, through these linkages, will not only help the Asian region to grow this year and beyond, but it's also the most important force that's going to drive the global economy to recover this year and beyond. So my own reaction is that that's the certainty in the uncertain world we're in today.
And also, Chen Jun, I know there are a lot of South Korean and Japanese business exposures in your city. Have they been planning for the FTA to happen, and what difference will that make for them?
So in our audience, in the city of Shanghai, there are actually a lot of Korean and Japanese companies. We're holding dialogues. What they're saying is that even though physically it's still difficult to travel between these countries, but given the technologies, trading activities already resume through VR technology, through online conferences. So we do see trading activities resume to some degree among the region. Certainly, a more comprehensive agreement like the RCEP, like the FTA, among these important nations of Asia will facilitate more cooperations among them. And as I said, the cooperation among these three regions is really, really critical, not only for these countries, but for all of Asia and for the global recovery.
All right. Thank you so much, Chen Jun. And also thank you to the representative from the trade promotion agencies from China, Japan, and South Korea. Let's come back to our discussions here in Beijing. Charles, Chen Jun just mentioned, probably Asia can set an example for the rest of the world in terms of integration, because with the impact of COVID, Europe and North America is still in deep trouble how to integrate their economy and how to integrate their health response to this. But do you think FTA negotiations are more urgent at this moment, or should be put on the back burner?
Well, absolutely. I think it's more urgent. Now is a very important point in Asian economic development to have further integration, to have higher efficiencies, to have more sophisticated supply lines in order to supply the rest of the world. Look at PPE, personal protective equipment. Where does it all come from? It comes from Asia, and mostly from China, but also other Asian countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. So if there is higher efficiency, more productivity, it will be beneficial for the rest of the world. And now is a really good time to take out efficiencies created by tariffs.
But still, a lot of people are debating what is the time frame. Why did the FTA between the three Asian economies still not happen? Because they are also negotiating for RCEP, which should take priority. What is your thought, Mr. Ge?
I think there's historical issues, and there's certainly, benefits and gives and takes to negotiate, and certainly there's other factors that impacted the progress of the negotiation. But from my perspective, I think the private sector should serve as a driving force to push this forward, to put the pressure on the government to negotiate, to get to the negotiation table and to get things resolved. On the other side, I also think that private sectors shouldn't just wait for the FTA. They should start, and they should continue to invest in each other's countries. With that kind of integration happening, and trade and negotiation would become easier, because there's obvious interest to protect, there's obvious benefits to get, and the countries would be taking a more pragmatic approach in terms of resolving the problems.
But in terms of the government, there's always the issue of geopolitics at play. For South Korea, Japan, and China, they've been plagued by many issues, historical issues, territorial disputes, geopolitical trust. Can they set them aside and have a common market and common currency even, or common technology platform, so that East Asia can take the lead in the world economically?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a very good suggestion from the representative from South Korea today, is that I think they should put the security discussion, political discussion with economic discussion apart. So a different group of people will be moving that forward. If you think about the region, the three countries, combined GDP is equivalent to that of the United States. It's bigger than the European Union, the number one. China is the biggest trading partner for Korea, but also for Japan. And interestingly, today we've seen that China has moving from we call the low-cost labor market into a world of consumption, where China now are buyers of the technology and services from these two countries. Yeah. So most importantly, I found that a third of the Korean import into China are semiconductor, technology, electronics related. That's what China is needing today. China is importing about $300 billion US worth of semiconductor components alone. So that with a huge market, I think it's very, very important for the three countries to work together economically to make sure that the technology common platforms. I wouldn't mention them, one of the very, very big companies, vice chairman at that time, said that they have an operating system for the cell phone, for the TV. They would love to have the Chinese companies, now it's very, very big, to collaborate with them and starting making this as one of the regional standard.
And there's also the talk here in China that we have to rely on ourselves for those core technologies. We cannot give the reign of control to U.S., who is not reliable in terms of technology policy.
Yeah, the trade policy by the Trump administration really put an alarm on our country, in terms of, how we want to have our own ecosystem that, can leverage all different types of technologies. Right now, we rely quite a bit on the U.S. side. That's the fact. But I think in terms of the region, if China, Japan, Korea work together, we are highly complementary on each other. And in terms of technology, China is very strong in terms of manufacturing, in terms of e-payment, e-commerce, and the financing, things like that. Japan is very strong in terms of R&D and in terms of design, and Korea is very strong in terms of semiconductor, telecommunication. Three parties work together, set up some standards, work with each other. That would help quite a bit. I think a lot of technological issues can be resolved by working together.
All right. Talking about homegrown technology, Chinese industries have always been trying to move up the ladder of technologies in robotics, AI, and big data. And there are many promising startups already. And today I want to share with you a story about one invention that could possibly change the lives of millions.
我叫古月。
My name is Gu Yue. I lost my left hand in an incident in 2018.
是个左手。我原本感到
It destroyed my hope about the future until I found this small prosthetic hand.
Hello, Gu Yue.
Hello.
This is a powerful handshake, but this is not an Iron Man kind of hand. It will not crush you.
是。
No, it won't.
How long did it take to be so good at using it?
我用这个手。
It took me about 2 or 3 days to use it well.
So you can use it for daily chores like eating meal, drinking water?
对，就
Yeah, for example, I can hold a cup like this and then drink water.
How much pressure can this smart hand bear? Can it lift something heavy?
Well, I can lift something under 20 kilograms.
We've got a dumbbell here that weighs about 12 kilograms. Can you try to lift it?
Okay.
Well, you made it. I wonder, you're able to grasp some tiny little things like sewing?
Yes, I can try.
Let's try. Here are needle and thread. Let's see if you can sew. Well, you made it again. Well, thank you so much, Gu Yue. Thanks. The technology we saw earlier is called brain-computer interface, or BCI. The brain signals are delivered to the neurons and then received by sensors of the prosthetic hand. And then the signals are then read, analyzed, and translated into commands by the BCI system, which allows the hand to do whatever the brain wants it to do. And this is the most advanced application of BCI technology. There are 20 to 30 million people with physical disabilities in China. A fifth of them are related to the hand and arm. And globally, there are about 1 billion people with physical disabilities. For them, it means new possibilities. So let's talk about the technology competition and collaboration. We've seen that some Chinese startups already moving ahead with their own inventions and ingenuities. And Mr. Ge, you just earlier mentioned different countries may have different edges. The problem is, should they compete against each other or cooperate each other, or a mix of both? Where is the line?
Definitely, I think in today's world, people should work together. If you compete fiercely heads on against each other, nobody will win. If you look at the technologies, they are basically developed layers by layers. Technology is not now invented in the garage, and then you start up with something that can resolve any problems. So companies have to work together. So for Asian countries, particularly, innovation is definitely now a strong point, if you compare with other parts of the world. And definitely working together, finding common solutions for the people, especially at this difficult time, coming out something that can uniformly applied in the region would be an extremely important mission. And I think that will address the problems for the people, and definitely will see business opportunities.
Yeah. As you said, it is appealing to have a bigger market other than the domestic market. Japan, South Korea have big market. They have purchasing power. But the problem is, can one country's technology or one company's technology be applied in a wider place? So far, we haven't seen, for example, Chinese Alibaba go to Japan and South Korea, or some South Korean Japanese tech companies have wide base here in China. What can we do to change that picture?
Yeah, I think in my past life, I've done business in all places, both Japan and Korea. I feel like clearly the first to the technology. I think technology can be utilized into those places. For example, one of the companies I saw the name over here called Horizon Robotics is doing the AI chip, selling chips into Japanese and Korean car manufacturers. I was speaking to a group of Japanese car manufacturing companies prior to the COVID in Japan, in Tokyo. So I think that right now that I think what I like to see is culturally, the Chinese people, Japanese people, and Korean people, they somehow need to work together and forming a group in way each other, rather than separating by their own groups. Today, there's a lack of actually even among the business side, other than the national FTA discussion, collaboration between the groups. I would encourage that to happen, face-to-face parties, gatherings, cross-investment. Technology alone is universal. If you have a chip, AI chip, you can sell globally. You can sell into different cars. having a parallel, we call technologies, will only add the cost to the infrastructure and making sure the end users are paying more to the technology and the goodies you're buying. So I think we should encourage a common utilization of a specific technology on the global scale.
It still takes a leader for technology to spread all around the world. It used to be the US, and now there is a competitive partner here in China. Do you think, Charles, China can play that leader in technology field so that everybody can come aboard?
Well, I think there are many different technologies, and the U.S. is certainly not leading in mobile payment. China is leading in mobile payment and 5G. And with what is being built, the digital infrastructure that's being built in China today, China has the advantage to move ahead in AI, in big data, in driverless vehicles, and so on and so forth. In many sectors, I think China is already leading. When the U.S. payment system includes right now sending the mail, sending checks in the mail, China is already using electronic instantaneous transfers. So I think different sectors will have different leaders, which is a good thing. It's global and everybody can benefit.
They're all facing pressure from deglobalization drive, it's especially from advanced economies in Northern America and Europe. Does it make more sense for them to band together?
If you look at the proximity, they're very close by, just neighbors, right? Number two, that I think is very complementary in terms of the technology and also the market per se. Japanese design, some electronics goods are very, very suitable to Chinese consumers. They can buy very easily from Japan. They like the product. So that's why the reason of free trade among the three countries should be considered as integrally, and so that they can do business together and to sell technologies, service to each other.
Which sector do you think might make more sense for the three parties to join hands? In the past, there was automobiles, there was home appliances, now semiconductor?
I think semiconductor electronics is one thing. Automatic driving, that's another thing, because Japan has the most influential car manufacturers globally. But if you look at the EV cars, it's doing very well in China. Actually, Toyota just made a few $100 million investment into an automatic driving technology company in China. So that's something I think collaboration already started. We would like to continue to see that type of collaborations to continue.
Your thoughts, Mr. Ge? What sectors, what technology might be the game changer for the collaboration picture?
I think digitalization would be the key. China is leading on 5G. China is leading on mobile payment. China is leading on e-commerce. And those areas actually are not that well developed in some of the places like in Japan or Korea. And I think China definitely can play a role there in terms of helping these countries to develop this kind of systems. Then on the other hand, China is not that advanced in terms of semiconductor equipment manufacturing, and Korea is very strong. Japan has a lot of semiconductor companies. So working together, China can benefit from there as well. So I think two areas. One is digitalization. The other is a high-tech collaboration.
And your thoughts, Charles?
Financial collaboration in the financial sector, I think, is also significant, because if you look at, for example, U.S. Treasuries yielding 10-year for less than 1%, if you take out the 1.2% inflation, you're getting negative yield. So the Chinese bond market becomes very attractive to others, especially in Japan, which is really not getting any yield. So I think, on the financial sector, there's a lot of room for collaboration. Right now, China is opening up the financial sector. Many Western companies have come in, and it's unfortunate that our close neighbors are not moving as aggressively as the Western companies.
Is there a reason why they are not so enthusiastic as many Western companies, services companies?
The Western services company take a look at their global portfolio, whereas the Japanese and the Koreans are still more regionally focused. When they look at a global portfolio, they look at the Chinese market size, they say, well, we have to allocate 20%, 25%, 30% to Asia and most of it to China. And that's why they're aggressively pursuing it.
What about the other way around? As Mr. Ge said, digitalization is a strong suit for China. We want to promote digital payment wider. And can we push that in South Korea and Japan?
I think one tries. But again, it's a political issue. Because the Americans keep on talking about how this is security issue, national security, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, Japan and Korea both have U.S. troops on its territory. I think there's no question, especially with COVID-19, China, instead of physical infrastructure after 2008, we now have a digital infrastructure being built that rivals none in the whole world. And that's going to lead to advances in many, many other sectors, including not only what you mentioned, Mr. Ge, but also IoT. And this is going to be very significant.
So all these technologies, IoT or digitalization of finance, require a wider user base. If we can include South Koreans and Japanese into this, that will be added bonus for this technology. But as Charles mentioned, there are also political blowbacks. How can we convince our partners and neighbors maybe it makes sense in the longer term?
Yeah, so on the government side, I think there's a lot of positive development on the FTA negotiations, and I think you inevitably, although you are talking about
that must be an agreement in the
FTA part of the deal,
negotiations,
the
financial services.
Definitely, the trust between the countries, and I think that probably is one of the reasons why the progress is not moving forward as rapidly as we all like to see. But then on the other hand, businesses can always be a driving force, even though there's all kinds of barriers there. As long as there's opportunities, there's people going there and pushing on that. And I hope the business people would, again, sort of lead in this area, and that puts the pressure on the government to reach an agreement.
I also want to talk about financial cooperation between the three neighbors. Recently, the People's Bank of China and the Bank of Korea agreed to renew their bilateral currency swap deal, expand that size to 400 billion yuan. So financially, it seems that there are more interactions between the three economies. But what kind of picture we're looking at, Mr. Chung?
Yeah, I think clearly the collaborations among the countries in terms of central banks, everything else, to make sure that the cash can go through one country to another, and companies who are involved in the business discussions, engagement in respective countries getting financed. But also, I think in the meantime, that I think on the we call it private sector side, there's venture capital firms, there's private equity firms. There are very, very good technology companies in Japan, in China, in South Korea. And I think the private equity firms, VC firms, should be investing into those startups, technology companies, allow and bring the technologies into another country. I think that might be very, very powerful. Having entrepreneurs, VCs, private equities, investors working together to bring the technology to the next level, leveraging their relationship and the connections, understanding of the other country where the entrepreneurs may not know, to really expand the business. I think that's something which we really encourage the three countries to do.
And interesting, China recently opened its bond market, and probably further down the road will open its capital market even wider. Do you think South Koreans and Japanese investors are interested in jumping in?
Yeah, that part I'm not sure, but I would hope that they will see the opportunities there. But in terms of the cooperation between the central banks, I think what they have done is not enough. The business is growing, and the pandemic have driven business going online, and that requires further upgrading of the infrastructures between the financial systems, not only about the swapping amount, but also they should look at how to upgrade the digitalization of the payment systems. And also, China Central Bank is promoting this digital currency. Now, if the three countries can work together to come up with certain digital currency exchange, that will be even further welcomed by the business.
And Charles, you've been an investor all the time. Do you think the barriers for investment and also capital flows between these three have been going lower?
I think possibly for some political reasons they've gone lower among the three countries. But there's no question there is significant interesting investment from China's side into Japanese companies and Korean side into Chinese companies. And this will continue. This will continue quickly in the next couple of years, I think.
And Mr. Chung, if it is your advisor to the government, what would you say to the leaders of the three governments to do? What is the most important thing for them right now after COVID?
I think the number one, to collaborate so that no nation alone can develop all the technologies by itself. We need global collaboration. Number two is that we understand that anything touching data, privacy, you can always brand it as national security and other things. By defining in such a rigid, narrow mind, you can prevent all the nice technologies from extending globally. So I hope that they can define nicer policies and allow that further collaborations so that every nation can use great technologies together.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your talks. Yes, indeed, economic and trade cooperation are creating closer trilateral ties between China, South Korea, and Japan. But we also shouldn't forget the roles of small and medium-sized enterprises. And CGTN think tank has selected 30 outstanding SMEs. And they are?
The top 10 of China's outstanding SMEs are Cambricon, Megvii, Horizon Robotics, Pony.ai, UB Tech Robotics, Royal, Cloudwalk, AutoNavi, Mobvoi, and Shanghai Henlius Biotech. The top 10 of Japan's outstanding SMEs are PKSHA Technology, Sansan, Gatebox, Heroes, Abeja, Moneytree, Cinnamon AI, Connected Robotics, Sanbio, and Blue Innovation. The top 10 of the Republic of Korea's outstanding SMEs are Musinsa, Yanolja, Aprogen, Care Labs, Bespin Global, Moneybrain, Rainist, Seoul Robotics, Senstone, and Stradvision.
And congratulations to all the winners. And of course, CGTN Think Tank will also publish the details in English on all the platforms, social media platforms we have. And look forward to that. And with that, we come to the end of Dialogue Special on China, ROK, Japan trilateral trade. We want to thank all our panelists and guests for their wonderful discussion. Special thanks to Professor Jian Jun from Fudan University and their panel of entrepreneurs and also audiences in our Shanghai studio. Thank you, Professor Chen.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Cheng Hong. Thank you, Mr. Ge Jun. And thank you, Charles Liu. And also our virtual friends here in our Beijing studio. They've been cheering me up all the time. And that will do it for this edition of the Dialogue Special. Thanks for watching. I'm Zhou in Beijing. Goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.